So Deborah Ferro Burke, PhD, class of 1973 at Smith, is a trusted advisor, consultant, and coach to leaders and their enterprises who has built and delivered leadership programs, conducted qualitative assessments, and facilitated high-stakes decision-making at Fortune 50 companies, startups, and universities. An effective speaker, she taught at RPI and MIT and has written about how leaders and scholars influence corporate transformation. Diane Okrent, also class of 73, is a qualitative marketing research consultant with 40 plus years experience moderating focus groups and conducting interviews with consumers and professionals. Her company provides marketing research and consulting services for consumer-oriented and business-to-business clients. So I welcome them both, and I'm so excited to get going. I'm going to just unmute them, and I know we are also going to switch PowerPoint, so that might just take a second. All right, welcome Debbie and Diane.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Can everybody hear both of us? That's an important detail. Okay, great.
Right, this is Debbie. Can you hear me? And
I can hear you both.
okay. I'm
Great.
trying to get rid of a thing here. Okay.
And so Debbie, you'll just need to share the PowerPoint.
Yep.
All right. And we are, I'm in my office in New York City, and Debbie is in Lenox, Massachusetts. And
right.
The wonders of technology.
And I am joining from Northampton, a very quiet J term here, but still nice. We have no snow yet, but it seems like there might be.
Okay, Debbie, you were there. There you are.
There we go.
You got it.
Okay. I'm going to put the chat down low so we can't, we're not distracted by it. Ready? So we are delighted to be able to do this webinar with you. The important thing to recognize is that all the questions are really about you. You now, the way you were at graduation, and the way you think you might become as you look forward. We, in addition to looking at, giving you a chance to look at you through general lenses, we also are going to be talking, as you know, about Me Too, the world, and about Smith, and about anything else you'd like to say. To explain this webinar and the survey methodology, we want to tell you that it is a very verbal, qualitative survey, and Smith College women over 60 or 50 who responded are very, very verbal. Diane has gone through thousands of verbatim comments, some of which we'll share. We're pleased at the response rate and the completion rate. It's a long survey. We're glad you did it. It's important to know that most of the questions offered multiple responses, so percentages don't add up to 100. The important thing is that we're getting sort of a sketch, a picture that's robust and nuanced of Smith women over, in this case, 50. It's important also to know that you all volunteered to do this. Other people who might have wanted to do it might not have gotten the email because they never gave their email address to the college or whatever. So, people might have chosen not to respond. We know that there are people whose actual personal situation is not represented because they were too ill or something else. So bear that in mind as we go through. The way we're going to do this is I'll walk us through the slides. Diane has all the color commentary, which is really fun to see. She and I have done a survey of the reunion classes, of the class of 73 at our 35th, 40th, and 45th reunions. And we knew very quickly that we did not want to just ask questions about golden retrievers and grandchildren. We wanted to do something very much more subtle and nuanced. And so we came up with the questions that you saw, which are kind of a refinement. The survey's changed over time. we are clearly onto something. The subject of older women has made the news in the New York Times, and here are some examples. And these conversations, I predict, will get more vital, not less.
And these are in the last week.
Yes, those New York Times pieces. Okay, so I'm sorry that this is in the way.
Deb, do you want to stop our videos and just present the slides, or?
No, I kind of like seeing you.
Okay.
If that's okay with you.
It's a deal.
It's a deal.
Okay.
So for the class of 73, which is almost a tent pole in this age distribution for the current survey, we saw the interests and concerns change over time. You know, first we were talking about, would our daughters go to Smith? What about Smith's future? And menopause was a very big deal when we were in our late 50s. 5 years ago, it was all about caring for other people and whether or not we were going to keep working. This year, now that we're 67 in the class of 73, we found ourselves in what we called a sweet window of life, with time for ourselves and family and friends. There are not a lot of demands on most of us, it seems. What we also found was when we did this new survey that you responded to, the responses are substantially similar, except in a couple of places where we will point out the differences, and they will be probably not surprising differences. Yes. Okay. Oops, sorry. So here's who you are. The more than 750 people who responded to the survey, this is the age distribution. You can see that we invited classes from 60 to 85, I think. And so you can see that most of the people who are interested are in the first half of their 60s. This is kind of a proxy also for graduation years, except for aided Comstock scholars, obviously, for whom those two things don't match up as clearly as they do for traditional students. So this is what we have. This is who we are. Oops. And we wanted to give ourselves a chance to look back, be reflective. That's one of the purposes of this survey, to think about you across your lifetime. And this is what we found out, that most of us think that our young self at graduation would be surprised. Half of us think she would be surprised. 15% not so sure. But when we ask how you think your young graduating self would feel about you today, it's proud. And here's one of the places where the differences are, there's a slight difference between the class of 73 data and this larger, more spread out data set. You who are in this survey, 65% of you said you're proud. At 73, 75% of us said we were proud. I'm wondering if there's a little sort of excitement about reunion built in there or something. There also, what's interesting is about the same percentage of respondents are not quite sure how that young Smith graduate would be feeling about the mature today spring graduate.
Okay, so we do have some comments. To my newly graduated self, thank you for acquiring a foundation of intellectual curiosity, self-confidence, and willingness to take risks. These traits have served me well and more effectively with each passing decade. Also, my newly graduated self would be surprised at the difficulties getting a satisfying job in 1963 and would be surprised at the paths I've taken. Having been on scholarship from a non-college educated family, I have achieved ultimate corporate career heights beyond most women and my dreams. And I had so many insecurities when I graduated. I felt that everyone that I went to Smith with had it together, knew what they wanted, and aggressively pursued careers immediately. But it's not how you start, it's how you finish.
Great. In a nutshell, this is how we see ourselves on 11 characteristics that came to our minds. The blockbuster is we are well-informed and inquisitive. We're also active, secure, healthy, confident, connected to our families and friends, and we feel strong. And we are pretty optimistic about our families and our communities. Think of concentric circles here. The closer we are to a social group, the more optimistic we are about it. We're not too optimistic about the country and worried about the planet. We'll have more information about that later.
Okay, so just a few comments. I am personally quite optimistic, but at the same time quite concerned about the state of affairs in the US and the world. And I'd be positive about everything but for the political situation at the national level, which seems more short-sighted and divided than ever before in my lifetime. And then, what I did not expect turning 80 is that my life would be as vital as the many vital periods of my life. So,
this is encouragement.
Right. As Debbie said, there were thousands of comments. So if you don't hear one of yours, please understand that we could never include all the comments that were on the survey.
Okay, the next set of things we looked at and asked you about and that you commented on were health, homes, and future plans. And we're in pretty good shape as a group. If you look at this, the scale goes to 50, so 45 and 25%, well more than half of us are in excellent or very good health. And when almost all of us are in at least good health. And as I said, we don't know who was in health too poor to respond. There's a slight representation there, but in general, we're in pretty good shape. We asked you to look at your health changes over the last 5 years. And this is another one of the places where you see a difference between the 1973 people who are more or less 67 years old and this wider spread of people who are 49 to older and wiser than 75 and clearly into their 80s. What's interesting to me about this set of responses is 14 and 15% of respondents have seen our health improve over the last 5 years. So I guess that means there's always hope.
Okay, and some comments. The only evidence of my advancing age is arthritis. I've had 2 joints replaced, a knee and a hip. Do not fear joint replacement. It is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And then arthritis never goes the other way. Whenever I see a medical provider these days, the comments always seem to be prefaced by, "For your age," and then, "I lost 55 pounds and am consequently no longer pre-diabetic or hypertensive."
When we look at our health status, a quarter of us say we don't have any significant conditions or illnesses. The problems we do have, I thought this was interesting, about, as many as 20% of us have some of the indicators of later serious problems. We have high cholesterol, hypertension, musculoskeletal stuff, allergy and asthma. 14% consider themselves obese. But given all of that and the wide age spread, it's interesting to me that only 5% say you have heart disease or diabetes, which are 2 big ones. 18% have cancer, which makes it on par with vision problems, which I think we tend to think of in a whole different category, and 14% hearing problems.
Deb,
Yeah.
Is that cancer have, or it could be have or have had?
The question's asked in the present.
Okay.
So, but we don't know exactly how it was
Okay.
answered. Okay. And 9% have issues that were not on the list. Basically, this reinforces the idea that we're pretty healthy. Now let's look at where we have lived and where we plan to live. And we are a pretty geographically stable set of people. 70% of us haven't moved in the last 5 years, and 67% plan to stay where we are over the next 5 years. Of the ones who have moved, it's about a quarter. People have downsized, upsized, and added a residence. So if you think about how people retire and they add a house in a former vacation place, and now they have 2 houses and various other things, that begins to make sense. Almost equal numbers move to be closer to family and to find a better climate. Sometimes you think everybody moves to a better climate at retirement age, and we do not bear that out. Small percentage plan in the future to live near family, and a very small percentage plan to live with family. Also, a very small percentage have moved into continuing care facilities, and a small percentage plan to do that in the next 5 years. So that continuing care community may be on the wane. We do not seem to be very interested in moving into those communities. When we look about all the things you have to do to take care of your future, most of us are doing something: legal and financial, 46% health plans, informal arrangements with family, and then you get the continuing care communities again. But 17% no arrangements, don't want to think about it if you say, I am not a planner. So this is also kind of easy to understand. Some of us are better at these planning activities than others. Marriage and divorce and single status and widowed status, partnered status. Here's another one of those places where there's a difference between the narrowly focused age group of the class of 73 and the bigger, wider focus of age in this survey. We're pretty sure that the number of currently married people has gone down because people have died. The divorce rate has stayed the same. Single rate adjusts a little bit, and widowed rate goes up. So that seems logical on the face of it. Nearly 70% of us are not caregivers, which struck, I think, both Diane and me, because 5 years ago when we surveyed our own class, it seemed like everybody was a caregiver. More than half of us have no grandchildren, and then the pets, about half have pets, and only 5% have never had pets. So a lot of people borrow other people's pets. They used to have a dog, they used to have a pet, and so on. Are there comments about pets?
There are comments. Well, first the comments about being a caregiver. Comments like, my mother passed away 3.5 years ago, so I no longer provide significant health or daily care for others. Another, I share responsibility with my siblings for my mother, who's 89 and frail and living alone. And another, my husband is legally blind and his vision is getting a bit worse, so he is relying on my help more. I think we talked about this being like the sweet, in many ways, the sweet spot between having to care for our parents and eventually helping to care for our spouses. And on the pets, I adore our 13-year-old poodle, but she is another time-consuming being. She has a cardiologist, ophthalmologist, and dentist, and I probably spend more time on her medical care than on those of the humans in our family. And I babysit my daughter's dog weekly when she travels for business. It's the best of both worlds, the love of a dog without the daily responsibility. And one respondent said, I have one fat cat.
At reunion, we had one new beagle who enjoyed being there. Okay, how about working, volunteering, interests and plans? This is one that is sort of counterintuitive almost. How much time do you spend working for pay? That green portion is full-time. The big blue at the bottom is part-time. Yellow is a few sporadic hours, and the slim turquoise aqua is all the time. So this is interesting when you think that some of the respondents are in their 70s and 80s, and Diane has great comments about this.
I still teach for honorariums. I am 85 years old. I still work more than full-time, about 60 to 70 hours a week. This is somebody ages 60 to 64. And another, I retired this year at 79 after 54 years as a clinical social worker.
There seems to be a trend that people who have their own consultancies, as Diane and I do, or some kind of practice of their own, are likely to be working quite a bit. Compared to 5 years ago, how much do you volunteer? And the aqua section there are people who don't volunteer. The more and the same amount are about equivalent, and a few of us have scaled back. In my case, I've scaled back my volunteer work because I'm working more and enjoying it more and having fun and traveling for business. So it's hard to tell exactly what's going on there. But there's a strong volunteer culture. And even if we've scaled back, a lot of us, most of us volunteer.
Including for Smith.
Including for Smith. Yeah.
So some comments, technically less at the moment, but I cycle through leadership roles at church. I am a retired lawyer and do several hundred hours a year volunteer work representing applicants for asylum. This is very challenging work, and it is one of the most meaningful things I have done in my life. And I don't volunteer much. My job combines earning and public service, so I feel I'm getting a twofer. Okay, and how do we spend our time? We are big readers. Almost all of us admit to reading for pleasure, and 38% of us are in book groups or discussion groups that sort of go along with that. We're big on culture, not so big on following sports. That didn't seem to surprise me. We didn't define cultural events. It probably goes beyond the Boston Symphony to other kinds of cultural events. We're also big into physical activities and non-competitive sports. Big into travel, and the travel this information was generated by a couple different questions, and on some of them the theme of wanting to travel was just big and strong. We also admit to enjoying watching TV and streaming programs, and I think the ability to stream has maybe bumped that number up. It's interesting to think about. We do the domestic arts of food and wine, gardening, and horticulture. 30% are involved in religious activities and 27% in social service activities. And with all of that, 8% of you participate in competitive sports. So some of the comments: I listen to music, listen to radio, read online. Unfortunately, spend too much time on 4 Kindle Fire app games. I like to cook and give elegant dinner parties. The New York Times crossword puzzles. I began studying jazz piano 4 years ago. We sing with the Raging Grannies, an international group for peace and social justice. I am a very amateur storyteller, and I do open mics. Okay, and we continue to educate ourselves. This is, have you taken any courses in the last 5 years? And here's the big thing: fitness and wellness. Over 60% of us.
over 40% of us have taken professional programs for certification or continuing education in our fields. That's more than the number who have taken fun programs, which could be about cooking and gardening and other interesting things. That's the yellow bar. Personal development is the aqua bar. Lifelong learning, this refers to you've taken courses at an OSHER or other kind of lifelong learning higher education program. We've taken college and graduate school for no credit, but some of us are still taking 4 credit courses.
Okay, so some of the comments were, I just completed my doctorate in May 2018, and this is somebody who started the doctorate at age 62. Certification classes to become a master gardener in my county and more regular yoga classes. I take ballet once or twice a week and have taken art courses. I take a small informal French class. We watch films and write essays on them. I belong to an informal monthly gathering that explores the spiritual, very broadly defined. I belong to a gym and regularly take group fitness classes. I entered Smith as an AIDA at 60, graduated at 64. And this is somebody who's in a continuing care retirement community. I teach courses, French, writing, ethics and aging, political history and theory, and organize an academic summer school at the CCRC, where I live.
Busy, busy, busy.
Right. I also have just, we did ask Debbie about just general comments about working, learning, and volunteering. So we got things like, I want to do all 3, working, learning, and volunteering, as long as I can. I firmly believe that staying mentally, physically, and emotionally fit work together. And having tried many volunteering activities since retirement, I'm still looking for the one that delivers that special blend of helping others, being personally fulfilling, and being busy.
Okay, when we look forward to the next 5 years, the theme here is more, both more caring for others and more travel and volunteering. Things that are not, in general, we're not moving closer to our families, about the same level of volunteering for most of us, the same number of residences for most of us, and going to school. And fewer of us are looking at less income and same or smaller residences and same or less time working. So we've got a handle on what we expect to see coming, I think is really the message there.
Okay, so I hope to work for 5 more years, then see where I am. I can still hear, and if I can still hear and remember, and I am still healthy, I will continue to work. I need to work as long as I can, but at this point, it's not a burden. Wish I could be rich and lazy, but that's not to be. If my health continues to allow us to travel, my husband and I hope to do that for several more years. And I'm planning to work less and spend more time with family and friends and doing things there's no time for when working full time.
Okay, so another way we came at this was, how do you expect to spend your elderhood? And this is where travel and culture, volunteering are the big ones. But we admit to expecting to nap more. One of my personal favorites.
Okay, so a couple of comments.
Yeah.
What is elderhood? Sounds dangerous to even think about it. Or this is actually a very good question. Since I've been retired for several years, I didn't make this bigger. It makes me consider how I want the future to differ from the present. So thanks. Travel is high on the list, especially active travel, hiking trips, as long as I'm physically able. And write, read, see more art exhibits, repeat.
There are some things that worry us: our health, our husbands, the political situation, and climate issues. And those are not surprises, probably. Okay, this is where we break for questions. And Lindsay will help manage the questions.
All right, so anybody who has a question, please use the chat box, and again, a reminder to send it to all panelists and attendees if you can. Let's see, we have a couple of comments that have come in. Thank you for the joint replacement confidence, replacing my shoulder in a few weeks. Another one just about the clicking of the keyboard. It's distracting, so something to note. Hearing that other women are strong and working through their 70s and into 80s is encouraging. I am 70 and worry about what might prevent me from continuing with writing and community service. And another one from Kat. Note, some of us have wives rather than husbands.
Right.
We are aware of that.
We're aware of that, but the word husband is what showed up in the question.
Right, and in the comments. In the comments, really. I think we did make sure to have spouse and partner.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Would like to turn this into advocacy, letting people know that there are opportunities. Mm-hmm. Another one, do you think that there is a bias to the responses? That is, that respondents are generally happier and in better health than alumni in general?
There's no way of us knowing it. This was not a random sample. It's representative of the people who responded. So we have no way of knowing that. And there could be, I think it's just like when you show up at reunion, I think that there's a bias for people who feel good about themselves showing up at reunion. And if you don't feel good about yourself, you're not going to show up.
Janet asks, did you ask how many times people had been married?
No.
In past years on the class of 73 survey, we asked those kinds of questions, and we decided that at this point on the class of 73, we didn't really need to ask anymore. And what the survey that you filled out is the same one that we've used most recently for the class of 73. There's another question here, Lindsay, about did you see any significant differences in answers between divorced women and married women? No. We could do another analysis. There are a gazillion ways we could do more analysis by grouping people by age, by health, by marital status and education level and so on. If this were a doctoral dissertation, we'd say those are opportunities for further research.
I'd also note that Jay Ryan also wrote, as a recent divorcee, I think a lot about the possibility of a new and fulfilling relationship. So one thing her comment might add to someone else who's going through the same. Let's see, we have a few more. After a long, productive career in education, I'm finding hard time finding my next job at age 59. I want to work for another 10 plus years, and I'm healthy and energetic. Any tips for older job seekers? I'll just make a plug for, we have some career resources on our website, and there's a form you can fill out and speak to a career coach. So take a look at that, alumni.smith.edu, and I'd love if Debbie and Diane have anything to add.
When we get into the Me Too, there's some comments about age discrimination, but we really didn't get into ageism per se. Again, that's something that we might want to think about in the future.
Lots of questions about ageism.
Yeah, a lot about ageism.
And mostly related to work. And if you, what was interesting to me is one of the things in the Times this week was a letter about how older women have been older women are ascendant, no longer sitting back and allowing themselves to be invisible. And that's clearly something to watch, something that probably most of us will welcome.
Okay.
There's so many good comments. Wow, there's a lot. There's a lot to go through.
And we have another
yeah, we have some more
15 pages of the presentation, so
we'll keep going. I wanted to just thank anyone too. I see some responses to others, so I love that people are responding to other participants and giving some tips. So make sure to look through that, and we'll keep going.
Okay. I think I have some insight into the clicking. It's not the computer as much as it is the dining room table I'm leaning against, which is okay. So now we get on to issues and experiences, and this is social, political, the country, and me too. And we should say that on the first surveys we did for the class of 73, we didn't ask any questions like these. We only asked questions that were reflective of our own lives, or allowed us to reflect on our own lives. This year, it seemed that we could not avoid asking questions at this level, and we will talk about that a little bit. So we asked about a whole bunch of social and political issues and the degree to which we are involved. And what the data on this is very hard to display, but what we discovered that mostly we are aware of and informed about key issues. We came up with, I don't know, several issues, almost 20 issues that were listed as things that seem to be important in the news. And mostly we are aware and informed. About 40% of us are involved or lead political activities in this order: political activities, arts, education, and community engagement activities. So we're not just thinking about this and talking to the TV about it, we are actually out doing things. Mm-hmm. A lot of us are aware of the guns, economic inequality, and peace, and that's the highest place where there's awareness but not action. The place where there's the highest level of leadership is in climate change. That's not quite right. 27% of us are involved or lead in climate change and gender issues, which are the great big ones. The ones we seem least aware of are the ones that are very close to our own daily lives, how the land around us is used and zoned, and the whole issue of loneliness, which has been getting some press in the past year.
Okay, so some comments on these issues. I care about many of the issues in the list. However, I feel overwhelmed by all the news outlets, all the blogs, and all the opinions to the point where I can't do anything. The world is depressing, and my inaction is too. I hope to find the strength and energy to change and get involved. And then I'm active, not politically active, but I do tutor disadvantaged children after school, give blood, and serve at soup kitchens. I guess that's activity.
Now, this is the one that was getting a lot of attention at the time we were putting together this reunion survey last spring. What do you think about the direction of the country? And what you see here is nearly 90% of you who responded think it is going in the wrong direction. Very few people had no opinion at all about this, and a few people think it is going in the right direction. We have lots of comments about this, but we can tell you that even if we had not asked this question, we would have gotten this kind of answer.
Right. These comments bubbled up in various areas. So we've just picked out two really pithy ones. Trump is the worst thing that has happened to our country in my lifetime. And I hope for change and am optimistic in the short term because of the increased number of women in Congress. but am pessimistic about the greed that promotes a disregard for the environment and for the welfare of people less fortunate.
And yet, how do we feel about the future? Most of us are positive. Again, this is one of these concentric circle things. We feel most positive about our social communities, our spiritual communities, ourselves, our own personal selves, and our families. We feel neutral at best about the social world and the planet, the human world and the planet. And reiterating, almost 90% think that the country's going the wrong direction.
Mm-hmm. So just a few comments there. Areas in which I have more control or influence over, I feel more optimistic. I love my spouse and my family. They have always supported me throughout. The state of the world leaves me currently extremely worried and uneasy. And I am worried about the environment and the planet my grandchildren will inherit.
Okay. We asked about Me Too on the reunion survey because when we were forming the questions last March was the time that the Me Too story broke. Harvey Weinstein, Charlie Rose, and the beginning of the Me Too movement. And what we find is that almost 2/3 of us, almost 60%, have reason to say Me Too. This question was posed exactly as you see it there. Do you have reason to say Me Too? Allowing you to interpret the definition of Me Too. Mm-hmm. About a third of us said, no, we're not sure. And the other interesting one is the yellow bar. People are not sure, even so. Even
So a few comments. I am a female who grew up in the 50s and 60s. You need to ask? And working in the 80s, especially in the garment industry, was a daily gauntlet of innuendos and unwanted attention.
Okay, so we took that large question and then kind of broke it into two branches. What we were trying to get at was things that we called gender discrimination, which is work, pay, things like that, as opposed to real physical violence. Physical harassment is that kind of unwanted touching that might happen at work or in some other circumstance. But we were hoping to see a difference between all of those things and the horror of violence, attack, or rape. And we see it. Mm-hmm. That pink bar down toward the bottom is the violence, attack, or rape. And thankfully, about 14% of us have experienced that.
Only 14%.
Only 14%.
Right. Okay. So a few comments. I think I handled sexual advances in my personal life, but gender discrimination in my age group was both subtle and pervasive, very detrimental to careers in spite of the progress women have made. And spent many years and still in a male-dominated field. In reflecting on several occasions, the guys would make crude jokes that made me uncomfortable, jokes not directed at me. I would either turn away, laugh like it didn't bother me, or remove myself. I wish I had said something and called them out. And most of my overt physical harassment experiences with Me Too were from much younger ages. The job discrimination issues were too pervasive to see clearly 25 years ago, but now they are more obvious.
And this chart responds exactly to that. Most of us had our Me Too experiences after college and before the age of 30 or 30 to 45, which is the heart of our working experiences. But it has not gone away for everybody because some people still experience this, some form of a Me Too problem, even after 60.
Okay, some quick comments. It happened in high school. Watching the Kavanaugh hearings was wrenching. Back in the day, I unconsciously learned that which men never to be physically near or next to in meetings, etc. Didn't even know I was doing this until the Anita Hill hearings. Then the light bulb went on. When I look back, it is shocking at how many incidents there have been, and occurrences do decline with age.
When we asked where the experiences happened, it was mostly at work, 2/3, 15% at school and college. Interestingly, 0% in religious institutions, which surprised us given the pedophilia issues in the Catholic Church. And those are presumed to be mostly acts against boys, but girls have had that experience as well. So it's interesting that it doesn't show up among you. The assaults were mostly by family and associates, in other words, people you knew, and a very small percentage, 6%, were random assaults. Here's the next one. So what did you do? Most of us did nothing at the time. Many of us told the person to stop. We talked about it, and in fewer than a quarter of the situations did we report to authorities. And authorities here means your hierarchy at work, as well as legal and police authorities.
Mm-hmm. At the time, it never occurred to me to report it. My friends knew, but none of us ever thought to tell an authority. I used the experiences as motivation to persevere and succeed. And later, I designed a course for my younger employees to help them avoid, mitigate, and report up problems. This was for women and men.
This is another one that's really important and certainly sets up opportunities for further exploration. How did your experiences affect you? And for the biggest response is it didn't have an effect. But the next ones eroded my pay, it limited my pay and caused me to change jobs. Those two had real world economic and other practical impacts, as well as whatever psychological and emotional impacts. Almost in equal measure, the Me Too experiences eroded my confidence and strengthened my confidence. That's the yellow and the aqua bars. Made me, the sort of pea soup green one down toward the bottom is made me silent on the subject. And that's a really sort of chilling one.
Mm-hmm. I did not realize I had been assaulted when I was younger. It took me to fully see that I had been a victim. I am stronger now than ever, I think. It eroded my confidence in myself as a young female. At first I was shattered, later it strengthened me. And when we were younger, this was the climate that we all had to navigate and figure out how to avoid situations. Now, luckily, some things are changing.
And so they're changing because we are doing some things, right? But a third of us are doing nothing specific, but almost half are talking to women friends, and more than a quarter are talking to men friends. And I would say that's friends and associates and colleagues. A quarter of us are mentoring and coaching each other and probably younger women. And about a quarter of us are taking political action, marching and protesting. We have writers and speakers among us who are speaking out on this subject, and 10% have really taken on the issue of changing laws and policies. The policies part includes workplace policies.
So comments, I have just started talking about the experiences which were well over 50 years ago, the first one. I'm raising aware children. They also had feminist grandmothers. And my professional work includes addressing the intersection of racial and gender-based exclusion.
Okay. Are there this is a pretty big topic. Do we want to take a moment to see about comments, questions, look at the chat room?
We've had a lot of comments coming in. Folks, I've seen a lot about people didn't know that they didn't recognize it when they were younger, and they understand it now. But there's quite a few, and I apologize to everyone. And I love how much chat there is going on. But there's over 200 people joining us today, so we have a lot of comments, and it's wonderful. It's exciting. It's hard to see all of them, but let's see. A comment: sexual harassment and income inequality on the job made me tougher. Had the all-male environments I worked in been more welcoming, I would not have fought as hard for my seat at the table. Let's see.
I did see one about thinking that classmates who were having affairs with professors seemed to be sophisticated. and we didn't see it as harassment.
Wow.
But at reunion,
abuse, really, it was abuse.
At reunion, there was one of our classmates kind of talked a lot in a particular group setting about professors and how they had made her uncomfortable by touching and so on. People also made the distinction between students and young professors who actually, there was at least one in our class where they married, a young professor married his student. And that was not harassment.
And then there's the movie The Wife. And she's a Smith student and he's a Smith professor.
I haven't seen that yet.
Oh, you have to see it.
Gotta see it.
Comment from Ruth. The comment about our younger selves and harassment discrimination at work struck me. I think I was totally unaware that I was being discriminated against. It was the norm. A lot of good comments coming in.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay. Shall we move on to our thoughts about Smith?
Yes.
Greatest hopes, biggest worries. And this is mostly verbatim comments.
So I'll give them. So I'm so glad to see how Smith has grown over the last 45 years. I think Smith is a better college for women now than it was in the late 70s, early 80s. I love that Smith has added engineering and other specialties to its curriculum. I was explaining to a friend that I loved my time at Smith because of the diversity of women attending Smith, and Smith has grown even more diverse over time, which I applaud. So I think that sums up the hopes and the good feelings about Smith. And then concerns. So concerns about Smith: how to reconcile the strong academic tradition of Smith in regard to literature, the arts, philosophy, history, with the need for technical and scientific education. How to foster the intellectual development of students so they are prepared to learn from the lessons of the past while navigating a highly technology-based world. Another, Smith's identity is changing. My sense is that it's becoming known as a school that's extremely popular with LGBT and international students, and that will transform it even more in the future. It won't be the Smith I remember. That's not a bad thing, just different. And then, do not ever go co-ed, 4 exclamation points. Smith is so valuable as a great institution whose mission is to nurture great women leaders.
Okay. So if you kind of look at us, take the long view, we're slowing down a little bit, but mostly we're in good shape and we're in pretty, we're in good times in our lives. We're not experiencing great change in cognitive, mental, or emotional health, or in our relationships, living situations, and spirituality. And these are sort of inferences on our part, but we were struck by some of the stability, particularly in living arrangements, both looking back and looking forward. Most of us have no change in our physical health or activity level, and those levels are pretty good. They're positive, we're healthy, we're active. We're mostly financially okay. We're either in the same boat we were in 5 years ago, or our finances are better. And some of us are looking forward toward even better finances for a small group. The biggest increase in change, the biggest change is in the deaths of our families and friends. But there's a clear theme that as we lose loved ones and dear friends, we are getting good at making new friends, and which is critical. That goes to the issue of loneliness, among other things. And nearly all of us are making financial and legal and healthcare plans for our future, so we're being responsible. There's some non-planners among us. Maybe they're the most hopeful. Any comments, Diane?
These are really more Smith related, but kind of sum up where we are. I am content with my world and very grateful for my Smith education. Smith provided a wonderful educational opportunity and contributed much to my life. Growing up, it was the college I said I would never attend, as so many of my family who had graduated from there constantly raved and talked about it, more than I wanted to hear. However, I shall be ever grateful for my experience and cherish the friendships I made and the superb education I received at Smith. May it continue to thrive and be the outstanding educational institution that it has always been. And I never thought much about women's colleges when I was a student, but after teaching at a women's college for the past 20 years, especially in a field that is male-dominated, I am more committed than ever to women's education, and I firmly believe that there is still a place for all women's colleges as long as there is gender discrimination in the world.
Okay.
Okay.
So these are, any other wrap-up comments? Is that sort of it? Okay. We've had, as we said before, there are thousands. I would sort of magically count up 6, 7, 8,000 comments that Diane called through to come up with the few that we have. So although we never asked this question, we have found out that Smith alumni are very verbal and willing to share their opinions. So now we can take any other questions, and Lindsay will take your advice on how to do that.
Okay, so some folks are asking about if the comments can be shared, so I'm going to look into that and see what I can do to share them, because there's a lot of good conversation coming through on here. We had some comments about communal living for Smithies, and a lot of people really supported that idea, and a lot of comments about how to cultivate this community more often, have more of these webinars. They thought that this was great and informative, and so we're definitely going to be looking into how to create, how to help create community amongst everyone in this demographic, because I want to say we have about 550 people sign up for this webinar, and almost 300 joined us today. So that's incredible. Yes, Terry, I see your comment about the recording, and the PowerPoint will be available. And we will send that out after we're done today.
I would encourage people to make their own groups, either among their Smith friends or others. I've been talking about working on this webinar, and I have friends who have asked to take the survey, want their own private meeting, and they are fascinated that, we were looking at Smith because their institutions, namely Brown, Stanford, Harvard, and Yale, were not doing this.
Mhm.
But we will have, we'll have our own little group in the Berkshires. And one of my friends from across the state, who's a Wellesley graduate, wants us to plan it so she can come out for that experience. So I think what this says is there's a real desire for us to be talking with one another and connecting with one another about these kinds of life stage related issues. Mm-hmm. And it's gratifying to be part of looking at this.
Mm-hmm. And as you noted in the beginning, this just seems to be a really hot topic right now. The articles in the New York Times, book coming out, the fact that there are a number of women over 60 who are in leadership positions right now. The head of CBS News is the first woman and the oldest person to be given that position at the age of 66. You have Nancy Pelosi, who is the most powerful female in the country at this moment, in terms of the government. Donna Shalala is a first-term congresswoman in her 70s. It's a great time, and I look at women who are in their 70s and 80s in my community who are vital as ever, and it just really encourages me personally that this is a great time of my life, and I'm not being diminished, and I won't be diminished. Okay.
Okay. And I know that folks are jumping in the chat and mentioning different Facebook groups. There are a ton of very active Facebook groups for pretty much anything under the sun for Smith alumni. So that is definitely a resource, and one we could maybe even look at if folks were interested in just from this presentation. But I know that there are dozens and dozens out there. Yeah, so let's see. There's so much good dialogue going on within the chat, and I love the Smith community because you start, it's so vibrant. You start talking, and everyone's so willing to help each other and to jump in and to connect and say, I feel that way too, or here's some resources to help. So I've seen that throughout the whole chat box. This hour. So thank you all for helping one another and for offering your input. I'm going to take some time to definitely go through and make sure I read everyone's comments.
Super.
Yeah, and thank you again to Debbie and Diane for doing this hard work, for putting out the survey and for sifting through all of the responses, over 700 of them, and especially in just the last about week. Yeah, I think you've been looking at them. So
7 came in this morning.
Wow,
we'll look at them tomorrow.
I did notice actually our registrations went up by about 50 in just the last couple of days. So. Yeah,
we did not close. We did say we were going to close the survey last week. We did not close it.
Wow.
Right. So if you know somebody who wants to take the survey, they have access to it till probably about February 1st.
Okay.
If somebody has difficulty doing that, I have the links. The links are, or you may be able to share a link. I'm not entirely sure. But if somebody wants to take this, they should, and we'll make it possible.
Yes. Oh, wonderful. So, and I will be sending out the recording. It'll probably take a couple of weeks to get posted on the YouTube channel, but the survey and the slides. So thank you all for joining. Make sure to keep an eye out for our webinar proposal and submit something if you'd like to see more, especially a similar topic area, or if you have something that you think will also hit this community, we'd love to see it. So that'll be coming out in the next month or so. And thank you again for spending your time here with us today. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right.